What's up guys, Froggy here, and today I'm going to be comparing the Mavic Air to the Mavic Mini and seeing which drone is the right one for you. So right off the bat, there is no denying that these are the most portable drones ever made. The Mavic Air being the first smaller size drone that can fold up, and the Mavic Mini being a scaled down version of its big brother, the Mavic Pro. And to be honest, I don't think drones should get any smaller than this. You gotta realize that the altitudes these things fly at can get really windy, and I think having a drone be any smaller than this really increases the risk of the wind just kind of being able to flip it over and having it fall down. Now to be honest with you guys, the size difference between these two drones is really not that much. The Mini definitely makes an impression on you, especially when you see it folded up, but seeing the Air right next to it, it's really not that much bigger than the Mini. Now when we unfold the two drones and put them next to each other, they actually seem to have almost the same footprint on the ground, with the Mini being just slightly smaller. If we place the Mini on top of the Air, you can see the body of the drone is a lot smaller, but the wingspan is almost the same. Now I think the Mini has such a wide wingspan to prevent it from being flipped over in the wind because it is a really light drone. And that brings me to my next point, the weight of this thing. The Mavic Mini weighs only 249 grams, which DJI clearly states on the side of the drone. That means this drone doesn't require a license to fly, and depending where you live, you might not even have to register it. The Mavic Air, on the other hand, it weighs 430 grams, which makes that a difference of only about 180 grams between the two drones. But that difference means you'll have to register your Mavic Air and probably require a license to fly it. That's probably the biggest factor between these two drones. How much are you willing to sacrifice for the convenience of not having to register or have a license to fly this thing? And the Mavic Mini just being a way easier drone to fly. Now let's move on to the most important comparison between these two drones, and that is the camera quality. I went out and captured some side-by-side images so we can compare the two cameras. Now here's the thing. The Mavic Air can film in a log profile called D-Cine-like. This means it records a flatter, less contrasty image so that it can capture more dynamic range, which is how much the camera can see in the bright areas and the dark areas at the same time. The Mavic Mini only records in a standard picture profile, which is kind of an image that it's already good enough and you don't really have to grade it. It doesn't have any log profiles like the Mavic Air does. Now because of this, my raw Mavic Air footage won't look good next to the Mini footage, so I'm going to apply a small grade to the footage to make them match a little more equally. Now this might not be too fair for the Mavic Mini, but to be honest, I only record on the Mavic Air in D-Cine-like, so it doesn't make sense for me to switch back to a normal standard profile. After all, I am comparing how good of an image these drones can capture, so the Mavic Air has an advantage right there. So the first thing I notice is how much sharper the Mavic Mini footage is compared to the Air footage. I think the reason for this is because the picture profile on the Mini has a lot of digital sharpness going on straight out of the camera, while the log profile on the Mavic Air makes it look much more softer and less sharp. Now the sharpness on the Mavic Air was turned all the way down because that's how I usually shoot with the Air, because it gives it a more cinematic film look. But if you need to, you can always add some sharpness in post. The next thing I notice is how much more dynamic range the Mavic Air has over the Mini. You can really see it in this shot where the sky is very blue on the Air footage, while it appears a little more blown out and white on the Mini footage. This is mostly due to the log profile on the Mavic Air. Now let's zoom in and take a look at these trees right here. This is where you start to see how digitally over sharpened the Mavic Mini footage is, while the Air footage has a softer, cleaner look to it. This is also where you'll see the benefits of having a higher bitrate on the Mavic Air as opposed to the Mavic Mini, because the image doesn't start falling apart as much. Now I will be honest, the Mavic Mini footage does look better in this side-by-side comparison. But the truth is, I do like the Mavic Air footage much more. It just has this more cinematic quality to it, while the Mavic Mini footage looks a little more video-ish, as if it was shot on an iPhone. Again, these comparison shots aren't too fair because the Air was shooting in a log profile that I had to put a grade on, but this is my video and this is how I wanted to compare the two images. So when it comes to resolution, the Mavic Mini can only record at 2.7K at 25 and 30 frames per second. Apparently there's a 24p update coming, or maybe it's already out. While the Mavic Air can record 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, and 2.7K at 60 frames per second for some buttery slow motions. So you get a slight advantage with the Mavic Air camera there with the higher resolution and the higher frame rate. The Mavic Mini can also shoot 60 frames per second at 1080p, but the Mavic Air can shoot at 120 frames per second at 1080p, so it even has the advantage there. That, along with being able to shoot in a log profile, makes the Mavic Air the clear winner in the camera category. Now let's talk about the battery, because this is a surprising category here. The Mavic Mini battery is so small and is rated for about 30 minutes of flight time, while the Mavic Air battery is slightly bigger, almost like twice as big, and it's only rated for a flight time of 21 minutes, but realistically you get about 16 to 17 minutes on a full battery. I can't lie, but the Mavic Mini without the battery weighs just about as much as just the Mavic Air battery. That's kind of crazy. While the Mavic Mini without the battery weighs about just as much as the Mavic Mini with the battery inside it. So damn, yeah, that thing is light. When we flew the Mavic Mini, we were easily getting over 25 minutes of flight time, and I think a lot of that has to do with how lightweight the drone is, so the battery just doesn't have to use as much power to keep this thing in the air. But basically 2 Mavic Mini batteries is the equivalent of having 4 batteries for the Air. That just makes the Mini that much more portable. So the Mavic Mini wins this category for sure. A few more differences between the two drones is that the Mavic Mini only has obstacle avoidance sensors on the bottom of the drone, while the Air has sensors on the bottom, front, and back of the drone. This is really only a big deal if you suck at flying, or if it's your first time flying and you just don't want to crash it. But just don't be stupid, and you shouldn't really be crashing the drone. But do keep in mind, if you're gonna fly this thing indoors, there is a high chance you might crash it into a wall just because it's missing those obstacle avoidance sensors. Now let's move on to the controllers and see how they compare. The biggest difference for me is that the Air controller has the sport mode button right in the middle of the controller, while the Mavic Mini controller does not have a dedicated sport mode switch at all. And that's kind of a bummer because I liked switching into sport mode with just the flick of a switch. There's also a pause button on the Mavic Air controller, which is not on the Mavic Mini controller, but I don't think I've ever used that button, like ever. Now on the back side of these controllers, there is only one button that the Air has that the Mini controller doesn't have. I have this button set to reset my gimbal, so it's not really that important of a button. And underneath the controller, when we open it up, we have the control sticks in their hiding spots. The difference here is that the Mavic Air sticks fit into this rubber mold that you can quickly put the sticks into, while the Mini controller has these clips that they stick into, which I found just take a little bit more effort than the Air controller. There's also this USB port that the Air controller has that the Mini one doesn't, but I don't think I've ever plugged anything into this port, like ever. Now I also want to mention the transmission signal between these two drones. So they're both running on a Wi-Fi signal that is rated for the exact same distance of about 4 kilometers, but I found that the signal seems to be way smoother on the Mavic Mini than it is on the Mavic Air. I think it's because there's about 2 years of technological advancement between these two drones, so I think you can go further and have a better signal on the Mavic Mini than you can on the Air, which makes the Mini better in this category. And that's just something I wanted to note because the signal on the Air was sometimes kind of sketchy. So I think you'll get a better signal and more range with the Mini than you would with the Air. Alright, that's about it. Those are my main differences between the Mavic Air and the Mavic Mini. In my opinion, the Mavic Mini is absolutely perfect, other than the camera not being as great as it is on the Mavic Air. But it's still a really great camera, and you really just have to factor in what you value more: ease of use or a better looking camera. I think if you're just traveling and capturing video for yourself, the Mini should be the drone you pick up for sure. But if you're traveling and say filming for a company or a brand or doing any type of paid work, you should definitely go with the Mavic Air because it is worth it for the better camera. Alright guys, I hope this video helped you make a decision between the two drones. I'll leave some Amazon links down below so you can check for a good deal on either of these drones. And please remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more nerdy content like this. Alright, peace guys.